Ooh, you don't see those every day. You know, I know that with video games it ain't really like the real deal, but in a sense, it does do its function like fishing, where it actually makes you feel more relaxed when you do it. And by the way, you know what's nice? And this might sound a bit unrelated, but still a good thing to mention to feel thankful for. But after all these years, we are finally at the point where we are starting to get some actual good video game-based movies. For many years, movies based on video games always had a terrible reputation of turning out to be god-awful features. If it came from a game, then there was a very high chance that it would suck, ranging from pretty bad to unforgettably horrible. However, as time moved on, Hollywood never gave up on turning games into feature films, and all that work is starting to pay off, both with the sentiments of audiences and critics, and even financially, where, if done right, they can really make a name for themselves at the box office. And now that we live in a world where video games have become so commonplace in our culture, even movies based on the concept of video games have become a popular idea in mainstream features, with big budgeted blockbusters, and even animated films started to take a shot at it.
Nice share, Ralph. As fellow bad guys, we've all felt what you're feeling, and we've come to terms with it.
Really?
But even if video game-based movies are starting to get progressively better and better, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's no longer possible for them to go bad. And believe me when I say that when they get bad, they can end up surpassing some of the older notorious films in terms of their achievements to become one of the worst. And just recently, I have just witnessed what could possibly be one of, if not the dumbest video game-based movie ever made. Not many people know about this one, but it is actually a 2019 movie named Serenity. Back when it was released, it was one of those movies that was often considered to come right out of nowhere when it popped into theaters, and very few even gave it a second thought. Mainly because it was one of those January releases, and moviegoers often know how those usually go. And the fact that its distributor, of Iron Pictures, practically did no marketing whatsoever. That turned out to be because the company's founder is actually the most infamous fraud in the film distribution industry, William Sadler. If you watch my videos, then you might remember Sadler for his previous company, Clarius Entertainment, which only released just one movie by the name of Legends of Oz. I think it's safe to say that the movie was screwed even before it appeared in theaters. As a result, the film was just a complete disaster. It made no money, it was completely slammed by both critics and audiences, and the only recognition it got afterwards was a couple of Razzie nominations for the two leads. The only thing this movie could be thankful for is that it is not considered by many as the worst movie of 2019, because it was released in the same year as Cats, proving that at least it could have been worse. Those mutants still haunt me during my nights. But anyways, as you could tell, Serenity is one of those movies that's just destined to fail. And when it arrived in theaters, it just quickly disappeared right afterwards. Even in terms of its relevancy, it just faded away in obscurity. However, if one does decide to look into Serenity, if one decides to discover this film, then they will realize that the movie is actually a mixture. This is if you would go and combine Moby Dick, a thriller, a sexy and seductive film noir, and lots of stupidity! Here's what you got. You have the Moby Dick element with the main character, Baker Dill, played by Matthew McConaughey, who is this Captain Ahab-style fisherman obsessed with catching this one giant tuna. He's also a bitter lowlife with PTSD from his time in the Iraq War, and if he doesn't catch anything during that day to pay the bills, then he can always sleep with the hot cougar down the street to get some extra bucks. But no matter what, The world around him will always remind Dill that his big goal in life is to
Catch that damn fish.
You've got to catch a particular fish.
Go catch that fish, Dill.
Catch the fish in your head. That is the rule.
The film noir element comes in when Karen enters the scene, played by Anne Hathaway, who's the femme fatale that's the ex-wife of Dill, asking him to murder her abusive and wealthy husband. Of course, that's also where the thriller element kicks in, where Dill contemplates to go with it and figuring out how something is off with his home of Plymouth Island. As for the stupidity, oh man, where do I begin? How about that this is one of those very pretentious movies? You know, the kind that thinks that they're so artistic and thought-provoking, but all they do is constantly trip on their own feet and have absolutely no clue what they're doing. In this case, it thinks that it's mysterious and suspenseful, while also heating things up with some sexy actors that get down and dirty at times. In actuality, this is one of the clumsiest thrillers out there, where not only do they make it too obvious when a clue or something suspicious has come forward, but the clues themselves can often get quite ridiculous to the point where they feel out of place for this picture. Not only is this a case of bad writing, but I also blame the technical side as well, from the directing, the cinematography, and even the editing. Again, it shows that the film wants to be a little more artsy in its execution to give the thrill a little more of a punch, as if we're seeing all this in the point of view of Dill, but the way it tries to pull it off can almost be considered comical with how it's too on the nose when something important shows up. It doesn't let the audience try to put the pieces together or keep them guessing, and it just feels like an episode of Blue's Clues that's being taken way too seriously.
A clue!
Patrick.
Speaking of the writing, that's probably the biggest problem with the film. I know I just slammed the feature's technical execution, but a part of that is due to how it was following such a hopeless script that leads the movie to a completely unflattering direction that makes the experience an extremely bumpy ride. This is also a problem with the actors. I mean, technically I can't blame them too much, especially when the feature does have some very talented and noteworthy people like Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway, which are probably the only reasons why anyone would be interested in seeing this, but they were given almost nothing to work with and dialogue that either makes absolutely no sense or consists of exposition that more often than not leads to absolutely nowhere. Even if they try what they can, that doesn't change how the entire cast, or at least the important characters, are so despicable to the point that viewers wouldn't care to know about their outcomes. Especially Dill acting like this bitter, down-on-his-luck fisherman who only cares about catching this one big fish.
Get in the hole.
Oh, man.
Sit down and shut the up, the both of you.
Son of a bitch, we paid you 700 plus gas.
Also, I need to mention about this one guy who often pops up in the movie. See this Slugworth-looking dude? Well, in the first half of the picture, his shtick is always that he just missed his chance to talk to Dill, or someone else forgot to bring him up in the last second. He does get to him by the middle, but his tardiness beforehand makes him feel like he's some out-of-place comic relief. Oh, and did I forget to mention he's introduced like this?
What the hell is that?
But at this point, you're probably thinking, what the fridge does this have to do with video games? Why do I even call this a video game-based movie? Obviously, it's not even based on a video game, and there doesn't seem to be any video game-based elements in it. So why is it that I would give this the title of the dumbest video game movie ever made? Well, this is where things get really interesting, actually, because I know it doesn't seem like it at first, and nobody would even expect it when watching this film in the first place. But the thing is with Serenity is that the video game element is actually what it's all about. You see, that is the big twist. This movie is actually entirely set in a video game. That's right, the movie comes packaged with a big twist that everything you see here is all a video game. And who's the mastermind behind all this?
It's a boy sitting in a dark room. In some other part of the house, he can hear some guy beating his mother. So he sits in front of his computer screen wishing he could bring his dad back so he could kill the son of a bitch. There it is.
More specifically, it's Dill's super genius son who created an entire fishing game for himself as a way to escape his abusive stepdad, who is beating up both him and his Anne Hathaway mom. And as an added bonus, now he reprogrammed it to include AIs of his mom and his stepfather so that he could live his fantasy of killing his stepdad. Yes, I know the point of the twist is to be unexpected, but even with all the clues this movie dished out, this makes absolutely no sense, with nothing even indicating that it's a fantasy-style Matrix movie. And this is not an ending twist either. This is revealed after the middle at about the hour mark, and just let the movie continue from there. Trust me, even if you have around 45 more minutes, there is no amount of time that will let your brain comprehend how Dill's life in Plymouth Island is all just a game. And by the way, no, it doesn't explain how Dill's AI has a mind of its own and slowly discovers that he's in a virtual world. But they did reveal that the real Dill died in the war, you know, in case we need this to be even more confusing. But you know what's the worst thing about this twist? How this is the cause of making this film go from bad to worse? It's not the twist itself or the outcome of the twist or anything like that. It's the fact that it was revealed nearly after the middle of the movie, where the big moment finally appears and Dill has to continue forward to maybe kill the stepdad. Once everything's been revealed, as the movie continues on for several minutes, the viewers are given more than enough time to realize that this twist makes most of the film entirely pointless. Think about it. This is all just a kid's fantasy of his dead fisherman dad trying to kill his abusive stepfather. If you're not either Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, or Jason Clarke, you serve absolutely no point to this whatsoever. And the biggest shame of it all is that I'll give this credit that it does try to create an immersive world, to make Plymouth Island feel like a working little town with people that each have their own backstories to give them a good amount of layers. However, if they're not any of the three I mentioned, their roles are completely pointless. In fact, they're literally NPCs who just waste the movie's time.
Do you even know what this is all about? It's just me going crazy, right?
Also, I just want to add that the more that I do think about it, the more that I realize that Dill's kid is actually really creepy. Now, I know that some would go and argue that technically the death of his dad and the abuse of his stepfather really went and messed up his mind. That could be true, but then again, let me ask you this. If he's the one that programmed everything that we would see, and that he sees what we see in the film, and that his dad is meant to be the main character, then why did he program his dad to go and bang that hot cougar on several occasions to go and get more money? Why did he program a moment where his own parents are having sex? And for God's sakes, why did he program his own dad getting naked so that we would see the entirety of Matthew McConaughey's butt? Out of all the things in this movie, that is the one thing I can say that I did not ask to see that. And yet, that is actually the best way to describe this movie. Not just Matthew McConaughey's, but this entire movie is ass! Even if the video game element is only part of it and is more in the style of something like Tron or The Matrix, Serenity still counts as the dumbest video game movie out there. It was already at a bad pace with a hopeless script, unlikable characters, and clumsy technical elements like directing and editing that makes this a poorly paced thriller, But add one of the worst twists ever put on film, and the movie becomes a sinking ship where any effort or anything redeemable were all completely wasted and pointless, leaving the feature with little to nothing of value. My only recommendation is that this film is worth a watch if you want to see what a train wreck in movie form looks like. Want to make your own thriller or film noir style stories? Then actually watch this and take notes on what not to do and what to avoid. It's always important to learn from the mistakes of others. As for my rating, maybe some might find this extreme, but I have to go with a 2 out of 10 and for sure the Animax seal of garbage. This whole thing even feels like it was made by a 13-year-old who thinks he's a super genius. By the way, I do apologize if I ended up spoiling the entire movie for you right off the bat, and that this whole dumbest video game movie shtick ended up revealing the whole surprise for you about Serenity. Like, if one day you want to go and watch it, well then, you know what's going to be coming. You won't have that big reveal or that big twist that might shock you or whatever. I mean, I do understand that. There are plenty of people out there that want to do all they can in order to avoid spoilers, even if the movie itself would end up becoming awful or something. But it's just that I had to make an exception for this, because after watching this, after experiencing that whole big twist and stuff like that, it's just impossible to not talk about it. I mean, it is amazing how notoriously bad this twist is. Really, it is so bad that it pretty much destroys the entire movie. Whatever redeemable thing it has, it's all just thrown out the window because it just wants to make this big reveal that, yep, everything you see is all a video game. Dill is actually dead. It's all from the mind of this 13-year-old or whatever. It's just, it is so bad. It's been days since I have seen the movie. Like, as I'm recording this right now, it's been a while since I've actually seen it, yet it still shocks me on how bad it is. And chances are, by the time you're watching this review, it will still shock me on how bad that twist is, to the point of ruining whatever redeemable thing this feature would have. I mean, it's almost an achievement in itself. I had to give it some kind of prominent title. And if the movie decides, well, it wants to be set in an entire video game, if it wants to be considered a video game movie, then you know what? So be it! Not to mention the fact that I felt completely betrayed by this movie. I mean, this is a feature in which they would show an entire butt. It has great looking and talented actresses like Diane Lane and Anne Hathaway, and yet the butt they decided to show was just Matthew McConaughey's. I mean, I know that there are probably a lot of people out there that would be more than happy to go and see that, but for me personally, I feel like I got the short end of the stick. Ah, boy. Ah, well. Maybe I'll just go back to my game and just fish something good to make me feel better. I mean, that is what fishing in video games are for, right? See you later, dudes.